My name is Marshall Holland, and I am the Mormon Felon. I wanted to tell you my story about how I became a felon. So we'll give you a little life background and everything on me first. I grew up in a middle-class home with a mom and dad. Both loved me. Only time I really ever got in trouble in my younger years was at school. There were a couple of years that I got in trouble for messing with the computers, just having fun basically. So school back in the day, this is early 2000s, had a program on it called Fortress, and that program made it where you couldn't install stuff or change things on the computer and different things like that. So 2 years I got in trouble basically for the same thing. The second year I just kind of wanted to see how long it'd take them. So the first year I had a password file for the Fortress program stored on my student drive, and one of the teachers, I think, ended up saying something because one of the kids had told him that I gave him the password for it or something, and I didn't give that kid the password because I did not like that kid, honestly. But the teacher ended up telling him, and so they took me down to the office, and this time I met with the assistant principal, one of the assistant principals, and he was a pretty cool guy, and I think I got, a slap on the wrist or whatever, maybe sent to ISS or something for a few days. I can't really remember. It kind of blends together which year, what happened. So the next year I had like a Windows password file or something on my student drive, because if like an admin logged into a computer that wasn't connected to the network, it would save a password file, and there were some computers on school grounds that weren't connected to the network, and so when they log in, it saved it. And so I just copied one of them and put it on my directory and everything. Wasn't doing anything. And man, this time we had a principal that was a short black guy, and he had short man syndrome for sure. Like, he was bitter and thought he needed to set a precedent or something. And I think we tried calling my dad first, couldn't get a hold of him, and then I tried calling my mom. My mom was already pissed at me for something that happened outside of school, so she's like, "You're gonna have to get a hold of his dad. I'm not messing with this." And so ended up getting a hold of my dad. My dad pretty much just laughed. Like, it wasn't a big deal. Nothing was gonna happen. But so now the rumor, what my family always says and messes with me about is, you tried to hack into the computers to change your grades or something like that, which wasn't the case. I wasn't doing anything with anything. I didn't need to change my grades. I was fine with them. So that's really the only thing and I got in trouble for. And I know that time I got ISS, and a couple of the teachers spoke up for me. I was in drafting, and Mr. Bell was my favorite teacher. He was the drafting teacher, and I know he spoke to him for me and everything. I was the president of the VICA drafting club, and so we had a real good relationship, and he knew I wasn't going to do anything, so he spoke to him. So fast forward a little bit, after I graduated, I was working at Home Depot. I grew up a member of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, and it was always a part of my life. Normally, at that time, when boys were 19, they would go on a mission for the church, and I didn't know if that's what I wanted to do or not, so I didn't at that time. Instead, I went to work for Home Depot, and that was a fun job. I worked nights on the freight crew, and we had a store manager that was not a store manager, but a assistant store manager that was very cool. And so we would get our work done. We'd clock out for lunch. Sometimes our lunches would be, an hour and a half or something if it was a slow night. And we'd play stickball in the store, like under the lumber overhang. We'd be out there playing stickball with a dowel rod and a tape ball, And so we'd do that for an hour or two, hour and a half most nights on our lunch break, of course, not while we were clocked in, as long as we got our work done. And that was a pretty fun experience. Fast forward a little bit, as I was working there, I was going to school at UTA a couple days a week, all day, and then working nights, and so it just really wasn't working out. So I stopped going to school, and I checked. I ended up taking another job at Home Depot. This time I was freight crew, not freight crew. I was in receiving, and I worked, instead of all the way overnight, I worked from, I think, about 5 or 6 o'clock in the evening up until 2 or 3 a.m. And our manager that was over that decided to schedule a meeting for like 6 a.m. And I was like, man, I'm not going to be there. Getting off work at 2 or 3 a.m. I'm not going to be there at 6 a.m. for this meeting. Not going to happen. So he went ahead and let me go then, went ahead and escorted me out, then got stuff out of my locker and all that. I wasn't being, a jerk or any of that. It's just I wouldn't, I'd been up all night. I lived, 20 minutes away or more, and I wasn't going to come back up there, get home, sleep 2 hours, and then come back up there. So anyways, from that I decided, well, I need to go back to school. So I decided to go to put in an application for BYU Idaho. So it's a smaller school in Idaho that's connected to the BYU program, and man, I loved it in Idaho. I had an uncle up there and got to do a lot of fun stuff. But it was up there that I decided to serve a mission for the church, and I served a 2-year mission in Hawaii. So the end of 2006, I left for Hawaii to serve a 2-year mission. Couple months into it, I was bunny hopping a curb and didn't quite make it, and toppled over the handlebars and broke my collarbone. So usually when you get hurt, they will send you home to heal, and then you have the possibility of coming back out. Now, if I had done that, if I had gone home, I most likely wouldn't have been back out there. It was hard enough to go the first time, and let alone go a second time. So I stayed out there for the whole time, and while I got surgery while I was out there, they put a plate and some screws in, and I stayed on my mission, which was great. It was great for me. So if we fast forward some on there, I got to serve in some great places. I got to serve on a couple different areas on Oahu, and then spent probably 9 months on the Big Island, and probably 5 or 6 months on Maui. And while I was on the Big Island, my last area I was in was Waimea, which is home Parker Ranch. So it's one of my favorite areas on my mission. While I was there, I served with a non-typical companion. So you usually have a missionary companion that is, a missionary is usually 19 to 27 or so. And this guy was like 31, and he was previously, worked with the missionaries in this area, and had a rough life before this, and got permission to be a mini missionary. So he was a missionary with me. He was supposed to be for one transfer, turned out to be for 2 transfers, and it was pretty cool. But this guy, like I said, had a rough life, and I don't know if that's a story for now or story for another time, but I'll share a little bit of it now. So this guy was at one point in his previous life, number of years earlier, probably 10 years earlier, he was in prison for ice. So ice is basically like crystal meth. They call it ice in Hawaii. And he was one of the biggest ice dealers in Hawaii, particularly on the Big Island. And he straightened up his life and became a strong member of the church and was able to serve with me on a mission. But because of that, man, he knew everybody and was able to talk to so many people. I was able to meet so many people because of his connections with them previously, and most of those people had all changed their lives also and had become, they were no longer in the game if they were to begin with, and they were not using anymore. And so that kind of sums up my mission briefly. And so I got back home from my mission and went back to BYU, Idaho a couple months later. So back up to BYU, Idaho, 2009, and I met my wife, and she already had a kid, and then soon after we had a kid. So I had 2 kids at this point. Within a year and a half of getting back off my mission, and we moved back to Texas. She finished school for her degree in Spanish education. We moved back to Texas, and I ended up starting a business, refurbing computers, and then decided that I'd get them cheaper if I went into recycling. And so I learned the recycling end of the business. So we still do electronics computer recycling in the state of Texas, and often travel throughout the country picking up stuff. So it's provided a good means of supporting my family. So real quick, I wanted to talk about one of the deals that we had. 2014, we were working on 2013, 2014, we were working on getting out of debt, which was mostly student loans. I ended up buying some stuff at an auction, a bunch of servers and things, cost me about $5,000. And in the end, I was able to talk the company into letting me do the data destruction on all the drives that they had, and a bunch of this stuff. For anybody that knows, enterprise hardware was EMC hardware, and back in this time, it was before Dell bought them, and it was all proprietary drives, so they sold for quite a bit of money. So by the end of that deal, we walked away with over $100,000 on that $5,000 deal from selling all that stuff. So that was 2014. We bought a house, put a good down payment on a house, got out of debt, and moved into our house in August of 2014. And so that kind of sets the stage. So now going into my felony and what all happened is where we're gonna go from there. So flash forward from 2014 to I believe right around 2017. I was purchasing TSA surplus computers from GSA auctions, and doing well with it. There were these computers came out, and I'd bought some in the DFW area, so I was quickly able to figure out what they were, what their value was, as they started auctioning them off across the nation. And so at that point, I started buying a ton of them because I knew what they were worth. So I had some deals where one deal in particular, I bought stuff